I think there's a common misconception that if you're frugal, you're cheap. You don't spend money on things you enjoy and you never leave the house. Not true. Living a frugal life means you're intentional with your money decisions and you tend to only spend on things that matter or spark joy. Let's release the stigma around frugality and work towards leading a more financially intentional life. One person who seems to do this well is Vee Weir from Vee Frugal Fox and founder of Weir Digital Marketing. In this episode, Vee is sharing her financial freedom journey, how she happily leads a frugal life, and all the roadblocks along the way. Now, Vee and I met on Instagram. Her profile, Vee Frugal Fox, caught my eye with her honest opinions about finance. One post that really resonated was around her decision to not have kids and why there was no explanation needed. Vee started her Instagram to document her debt payoff journey, which started in 2016. In about a year and a half, she paid off $50,000 in debt. After divorce, then job loss, her life turned around. She met her now husband, moved to Colorado, and started her own digital marketing company. In 2021, she reached debt freedom again after paying off $71,000 in 5 years. Now she's inspiring others to do the same. Welcome to the City Girl Savings Podcast. I'm Rhea Reeves, founder and finance coach of City Girl Savings. I turned my life around with budgeting many years ago, and now I'm on a mission to help others do the same. I fully believe that you can enjoy your life on a budget, and this weekly show will focus on the intersection of money and the city girl lifestyle. Join me every week along with some special guests as I share my experiences, advice, and guidance on navigating life and money as an experience-loving millennial. Vee, thank you so much for being here, for being on the show. I know I just gave listeners some background about you, but I would love it if you could just dive deeper. What was life like before debt payoff? What sparked your financial freedom journey? And what ultimately led you to where you are now?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm always so excited to talk about my journey and quote unquote inspiring others to become debt free, live a frugal life. It's truly a passion of mine. I mean, obviously I turned it into my entire career, so I'm always excited to talk about it. But yeah, I started my debt-free journey January 4th, 2016. My student loan grace period was ending and I was looking at all of my bills, and I had just gotten married, just graduated, and we couldn't afford food, my medicine, and the student loan payment. So I had this choice. Do I stay in this paycheck to paycheck lifestyle, this quote unquote lack mindset surrounding money, or do I get my ish together and figure it out? And so I obviously chose the latter. And it was born out of that struggle, that very common, very relatable middle class struggle of I can't pay my bills right now because I don't have enough money. So I looked into budgeting that very day. I cut up all of the credit cards and I started originally with the Dave Ramsey plan. Now I am very anti-Dave Ramsey, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But I ended up paying a little over $50,000 in a year. And then my first husband and I got separated, got a divorce. I lost my job and things were really bad for a while. And so I basically stopped doing anything financial during that time period because of lawyers and the court, and I didn't want anybody to know anything about what I was doing. But then I met my now husband, and like you said, I started my own business, moved to Colorado, and we became debt-free in 2021, paid off my car, which was our final debt. So all said and done, $71,000 in 5 years. So that's my debt payoff story. And I became so enthralled with the personal finance industry online that now I help finance creators like myself create content, run podcasts, do their YouTube channels, anything digital marketing related when it comes to personal finance you could think of, I do it. So it's my entire world and I love talking about it.
Wow. I mean, I know throughout this episode, we're going to go into more details about your story, but I have a few questions just based off the background you gave. So, you have a very specific date in which you decided to turn your financial life around. Like, and I understand looking at your situation and realizing like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. Like that is a big motivator. But I'm curious, before that, what was life like financially? Like, were you conscious of your money decisions? Were you aware of what was coming? Like, what did life look like before you decided to really turn things around?
I'm a very big proponent of looking at how you grew up with money and how that informs how you spend it, save it, just have a relationship with it as an adult. And so I grew up with poor, for lack of a better word, financial education and literacy. I had no education. The first time I ever stepped into an environment where I was learning about money in the personal finance sense was when I was 19. And it was a extracurricular class in college. So it was like my first introduction into personal finance. My parents lived paycheck to paycheck. I've said this on other podcasts, but I very clearly remember my father pawning our family silver to get by every month and our cars being repossessed. And my parents made enough money, but they didn't know how to manage it. And debt was just something that was always there. It was the American way. And I grew up with life sucks, shrug your shoulders and, keep on going until the next catastrophe happens and then deal with that, and we would always get the cheapest things and the list goes on and on. So I didn't have great examples growing up. And so that definitely bled into my early 20s. I was very frivolous with money. I didn't care about money. I didn't have a savings account. I didn't invest. I was in tons of debt. That $71,000 is 18,000 of it was student loans and the rest was car loans, credit cards, medical debt, all the things. But I find that if you don't have that financial background, that strong financial education background, you are more likely to make mistakes in your own life because you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And I didn't know. So that's what my finances looked like before. I mean, I literally didn't care. And then all of a sudden that date is so stark because it felt like just this switch went off. And from that date on, I've literally looked at my bank account every day since that date. So it's just something that happened. It's a very visceral memory for me because it was such a pivotal moment in my life. That day is when my life changed.
Wow. I totally agree. I think when you don't grow up with the right money examples, it's very easy to continue doing what you've always known. And I think whether you've had good examples or not, if you have been bad with money or haven't made the right decisions with money or in debt, something drastic usually happens for you to flip the switch, right? Like for me, it was almost getting evicted from my LA apartment. Like I remember walking up to the door and seeing like, pay in 3 days or you're out. And, my family is from Austin. So I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And that was the switch for me. And so I think regardless of like what situations look like up until that switch, usually that switch comes for all of us and it always looks different. But once that happens, it's like you turn things around and over time it gets better. Another question I have just really quick about your background that you explained. You were married to your then husband. Was he on board with this decision of yours to turn things around? And if he was or wasn't, do you think that played a role?
Yeah, he was definitely on board. Actually, I remember that day. He was a sheriff's deputy, so he worked swing shifts. And I couldn't sleep that night on January 4th. And I remember him waking up to go to his shift. And I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. And he's like, okay. He was like half asleep. And I was like, do you want to cut this up? And he would just like took it and like cut it up. So that was a good memory of him. But yeah, I think at the very end, and our relationship was very tumultuous. There were so many problems. But at the end, it was honestly one of the only things that we had in common together. It was the only goal that we had together. But I do attribute my obsession with personal finance to our divorce. I think that when I first got into it, it was very, very toxic. It was not a good relationship with money even then. It was a different relationship with money, but not a good one. So yeah, I definitely think that it was a reason for us eventually splitting, but he was on board with it until the very end. And then when we ended up separating, he went on a spending spree and bought a bunch of stuff and a new Jeep and all this stuff because, he had been, I guess, lacking for a year with me and paying off all of our debt. But that's a whole different story. But yes, long story short, he was very much for it. And I helped him raise his credit score and helped him get out of debt. So,
well, hopefully he stayed out of it. But I guess that's neither here nor there. No, that's not our business.
Yep. Not my problem.
Right. Exactly. So I'm curious, obviously paying off $50,000 worth of debt in a year is a big deal. What were some of the lessons you learned over the course of that year? Like, did you learn anything about yourself? Did you learn anything about money? Like, what were some of the main things that stuck out to you throughout that time?
I think what I learned about myself is that I can truly do anything that I put my mind to. Like, if I want something, I will stop at nothing to get it. And that is thrilling and terrifying. Just because when I have a goal in my mind like that, I'm ruthless. And that kind of passion and that kind of drive and motivation can really hinder relationships. And I always caution people, yeah, I paid off that amount of money in a year, but I also got divorced. I also lost friends. I also didn't do anything. I also was obsessive to the point where when I woke up, I thought about my debt. When I went to bed, I thought about my debt. I was eating cereal and ramen. It wasn't a good existence. It was a very toxic, obsessive existence. And I think people can do that for a short amount of time, but that is not the way that I teach personal finance. I've been through it so that you don't have to. And I would much rather you live an enjoyable, intentional life and pay off your debt over the long haul than do what I did and suffer.
That's actually a really big takeaway, right? And it's almost like, yes, you accomplished so much, but at what cost, right? And at least you showed yourself what you're capable of, number one. But number two, you also showed yourself that there's another way to do it.
Yeah. And when I started my journey, I was, 22, 23. So I had a lot of learning left to do. And I definitely learned it within that year when it comes to money. And I think throughout that year too, I was obsessive to the point where I learned everything I really could learn about personal finance. And I fell in love with this industry because you can always learn more, but it's all I could think about. And that year showed me that, this is definitely my path. This is the industry I want to be in. This is how I want to change lives. And it gave me that desire to be in this space and to be a thought leader in this space. And it showed me like, this is where I'm meant to be. So it wasn't all bad, but it wasn't all good. And I really tried to bring that into my content creation world now. Personal finance isn't black and white. It's nuanced. And this is why, because I have this experience and this is real life. I'm a normal person. So don't do what I did.
Well, now I'm curious, like, I'm the type of person that believes everything happens the way it's supposed to, right? Like, I personally believe like that year that you spent kind of killing yourself, if you will, it had to happen for you to be where you are right now. But I'm curious, if you could go back and do things differently, would you change anything? Or do you also believe that you had to go through that so you could be where you are right now?
I too hold that belief. I am not the woman I am today without all the mistakes and struggles and the divorce and the addiction and the obsession turned into toning it down and being a normal person. I think if I could go back, I would take away my judgment of people. There's a reason I still have all of those posts up. I mean, if you really want to, you can scroll through my however thousands of posts that I have, but all that stuff is still up there. And I keep it up there to remind myself that I am capable of change. I am capable of empathy and learning a different approach to life. I still have my Ramsey Solutions signed Chris Hogan book and a little card. And it's one of my prized possessions, not because I advocate for anything that they do, but just because I like to see how far I've grown. So I was very judgmental. I was really rude and mean, and I am not that way anymore. I have very much done a 180 in that realm. And I try to practice empathy-based budgeting, empathy-based financial advice, and I try to see things in a more nuanced light. And I just didn't at the time because I was so wrapped up in the quote unquote cult of Dave Ramsey and just really, I keep on saying the word obsessive. I've probably said it like 10 different times, but that's just the only way I can describe who I was back then. So yeah, that's probably the only thing I would change. Everything else, like, it wasn't great that I went through everything that I went through, but now I'm here. So it did matter. And yeah, I went through it for a reason.
Can we talk a little bit more about like the judgmental stuff? I mean, were you judgmental with yourself? Were you judgmental with others? And regardless of where the judgment stemmed from, what do you think it was really that drove you to have those judgments?
Well, I was a deeply unhappy person. So I think it's very much where those comments and the thought came from. I thought, well, I'm doing all of this. And if you just follow the plan, it'll work. Like, look at me. I mean, I'm better than you. And it made me feel better to say that, right? Because I was in a really terrible marriage, in a really terrible point in my life, pinching literally every penny. And I just wasn't a happy person. So that's where all the judgment came from. And I did feel this sense of authority because I was paying off such an amazing amount of debt. But, the judgment came from me to people online, just whatever they were doing with their money that I didn't agree with, or my friends or family would tell me about things they were doing and I would make snide remarks and be like, well, I wouldn't do that. And I'm obviously an expert, which I wasn't at the time. I don't even like calling myself an expert now. Like, I just feel like there's so much to learn in this space. Like, you're never really an expert. You're always learning. There's something you're always new at. So I just like to say I'm a money nerd, but I had that air of arrogance at that time of my life. And I was just really mean. And I was a mean girl. And I can look back at that now and be like, well, I was young and stupid and I changed. So thank God for that.
Girl, we've all been there. We've all been through things where we're like, why on earth? But you know what? It happened and you moved past it, and that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I am the first person to admit my faults and my mistakes, and I had a lot of them, and I still do. I'm not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely have a different approach to how I live and how I treat others now.
I feel like this is slightly getting us off topic, but I think self-awareness is just such a powerful thing for people to work on, right? I don't think anyone will ever master it or be 100% self-aware, but I think being able to see yourself and maybe understand why you did or what thoughts were going through your head, what sparked like those actions and learning from that is just so powerful, not only in finances and money, but just in life in general.
Mm-hmm. Listen, therapy is hands down the best investment that I've ever made.
Yes.
So everybody who is able to afford therapy, please go to therapy.
Yes. And sometimes employers offer it for free through like employee assistance programs. So if you are not aware of that, please look into it.
Mm-hmm. It changed my life. I've had depression, anxiety, and PTSD almost my entire adult life. And I was just diagnosed with ADHD, and therapy has saved my life and made that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, semi-possible. I believe like you're never actually all the way there. I mean, you'd be like Gandhi.
Right.
But yeah, it's made it much more possible to really go in deep and identify that, yeah, sometimes I am the problem, but I am also the solution. So Therapy, 10 out of 10.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So shifting gears a little bit, I had mentioned this earlier, but I really want to spend some time here because I think there's truly a societal misconception that being frugal means being cheap. What do you think about that? Would you agree? Do you see that in the work that you do? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason they're two different words, right? I saw a meme and I think it was you need a budget. I cannot remember specifically because I'm online like 18 hours a day. But it was like, what if we change frugal to intentional? So frugality is just intentionality. And we kind of wipe frugality out of the vocabulary of the personal finance world. And I really like that because I think frugality has gotten such a bad rap for being cheap. My handle is Vee Frugal Fox, and I am sitting in a $500,000 home that I just bought. I am not cheap. my friends. I am not. I am very intentional with how I spend my money. And there's a difference. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, my parents would always get the cheapest insert whatever item, right? When their car broke down, they would always get the cheapest mechanic, or when we needed new tires, we would get new to us tires, which are not new tires, like that's cheap. We're getting shoes at Walmart that will break in 3 months. I would prefer to spend $200 on a pair of boots that will last me for 20 years as opposed to going to Walmart and getting the cheapest thing to put on my feet. That is the difference between frugality and being cheap. And I think it's done a lot of harm in the personal finance community because people do have that misconception, or it's just like frugality is a dirty word. And it's not, friends. Like I said, I am not cheap. I am very frugal. So
yeah, I 1000% agree with everything you've said. I think being frugal is being mindful about what you're doing with your money. Being cheap, it's not spending, it's making the decision to spend, and you're 100% aware of that decision, and you're spending money on things that matter, bring joy, or you've decided that this is the best course of action for you.
I think frugality for me is akin to value-based spending. So my husband and I just bought this home. The only reason we were able to buy it is because he is a disabled veteran, which means we get the VA loan. We don't have any PMI because he's disabled. And our lending program bought down the interest rate $10,000. So we got an insane interest rate. And even then, we spent $471,000 just getting in the door of this place, of this 1,096 foot square place, right? That is the market in Colorado. And when we were making the decision to continue renting or to buy, we thought long and hard about what we wanted, what we valued. We're home 90% of the time. I work from home. We're in Colorado 100% of the time, really. I mean, I think both of us have traveled maybe once last year. So we know that we're going to get value from being here. We know that I don't have to go and rent office space if we have a home. And also the real estate market in Colorado has been steadily rising for the past, 5 years, especially the last 2 after, the pandemic. So it aligned with our values, and we could afford it based off of Joe's service. And so we made the decision to get a 30-year mortgage fixed rate on this home. That's not cheap. That is mindful, intentional, value-based spending. And that's what my page and frugality is all about.
I love that. And congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
You. Yeah. You're the second interview I've done in my new office. So
I love it.
We put up these shelves today.
Oh, gorgeous. Gorgeous. I know the people listening can't see, but it's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So on Instagram, you alluded to trying slow living. What does that mean? And what does that look like for you?
I love this question. Slow living. And I have to mention my best friend because I do in every single interview that I have, Sammy Womack at A Sunny Side Up Life. She's my bestie. I'm actually going to see her in 9 days. I'm so excited. But she's the person who introduced me to this concept of slow living, and personally introduced. I mean, I guess I had heard about it on TikTok, but it's basically living in contentment and not trying to push yourself for the next promotion, the next client, the next gig, or living a milestone life. When I get here, I'll be happy. And when I get here, I'll be happy. And you're never really happy because you've never done the internal work that you need to actually be happy. You've never slowed down to really examine your life and what makes you happy. So this year, the January of this year, it's always January for some reason, I was doing my word of the year. And initially my word was impact, which is great. And if that's your word of the year, fantastic. I'm very happy for you. But I was starting to do too much. I was doing weekly newsletter blasts. I was doing 2 posts a day on Instagram. I was doing TikToks. I was doing all these things, what you're supposed to do as a social media content creator. But I just started getting really, really burnt out because you have to understand that while I do this full time, I also have a full-time business doing this full time. So it wasn't just me, it was me and 12 other people's content. And I just realized if I don't stop, I'm going to break. And so I changed my word of the year to slow. And so now with Vee Frugal Fox and the content creation I make there, I really try to just do what feels good, what feels aligned. I don't try to push myself. And I'm not trying to go out of my way to meet society standards of what success looks like. And that kind of brings in the child free by choice content pillar that I have, or value in my own life. But yeah, basically, it just means for me slowing down, being intentional, enjoying my hobbies, resting when I want to, and not feeling guilt for that rest, taking naps every day. I am the nap queen. I love naps. Actually, I just woke up before this interview. I woke up like 10 minutes before from a nap. So, yeah, it's, I've chosen to live this very non-traditional life of working for myself, not having kids. So I need to enjoy that and not let capitalism basically guilt me into feeling like crap about it.
I love that. I feel like I struggle with that. Like I had worked so hard to get myself to a place where I can run my business full time. And there are days where I'm like, why am I not doing more? Or like, oh, I have a free couple of hours. Like I should work. Like I struggle with like not appreciating. I very much appreciate what I have, but I struggle with like the societal standards of work and like grinding and going so hard. So I resonate deeply. And I'm still like gathering my thoughts around these feelings that I've been having about this. But I love this notion of slow living and like being able to like stop and breathe and appreciate where you are and where you've come.
Yeah. I think the pandemic really changed things for me in that regard. I think all of us as a society were forced to stop and really kind of take stock of what our lives were, which of course led to the Great Resignation and all that jazz. But yeah, I mean, I think as content creators, especially, we are pushed by algorithms and by current events and news to go, 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 go. I mean, I literally have a to-do list that never ends as a business owner, and every business owner can empathize with that. It never ends. And when I started this business and when I started working for myself, that's something that I really had to work through in therapy because I just couldn't finish the to-do list. And as a Virgo type A person, I was like, like this isn't how I'm supposed to live my life. But you have to be okay with putting it down. You have to be okay with setting your own parameters over what is enough. You can't let somebody else or a 9-to-5 workflow decide that for you. You have to decide. And that's really difficult as a business owner.
Totally. And I knew there was a connection here. I'm a Virgo also. I sensed it. I was going to ask you what your sign was. When's your birthday?
September 18th.
I'm the 2nd. So
nice. Yeah.
I resonate.
It's real. It's real. I mean, I'm a Colorado like pagan woo-woo person. So I totally believe in all that jazz. And I know other people are like, oh, okay. But seriously, Virgos, we are that girl.
Yes. So. No, I believe in it 100%. And yeah, no, I feel you, girl. I feel you. Got a money question you want me to answer on the podcast? I'm starting a new segment on the show called City Girl Solutions, where I answer any questions you have for me. Money, business, life, you name it. Submit your questions at citygirlsavings.com/QA and get your question answered by me in a future episode. And did you know that we have so many free money resources on our blog, Instagram, and TikTok channels? Find us across the internet at City Girl Savings. Okay, so I'm curious, do you have advice for people who tend to overspend or shop on impulse, but they actually want to lead a frugal life? Like, where can these people start when they know that they tend to accumulate more than maybe they should? What tips do you have?
Yeah, I used to be an impulse spender, so I actually have quite a few tips. First is especially impulse spending with the little contraption that you have in your hand and in your lap. Take all of your credit cards, all of your debit cards, any autofill off of your smartphone and your laptop, because the easier you make it for yourself to spend money, the more that you will spend money. And that's the whole point of these companies allowing this to happen. They want you to spend more money on their products, right? So take that off immediately. The year that I spent paying $50,000 off my first go around, I didn't walk into a Target for a year. I literally would not allow myself to go into big box stores. Target is my weakness because I am a middle-class white girl. So don't go to Target. Just don't go to the stores. If you know you're going to be triggered and spend money in a store, don't go to it. I mean, they have online pickup now. Like you can put your order online and you don't have to walk past the dollar section, which gets me every time. And that's the same with groceries too. Like do Walmart pickup, do any grocery pickup, and you will spend exactly what you know you're going to spend on, and you're not going to be persuaded to spend on impulse items like they want you to. And then the last one is probably just have either a savings account or a sinking fund for your money so that if you do end up spending whatever on something that you probably shouldn't have, you have that money to back it up. You know, you're like, well, this wasn't the best decision, but you know what? I had $100 in my miscellaneous spending fund, so it's okay this month. And give yourself grace because we live in a world where it's spend, 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 and sometimes we do. And you have to spend money to enjoy life. I think that's also another important thing. Like sometimes you're not going to be on budget. I mean, for example, Target, a couple of months ago, the Soda Stream was on sale, like 30% off. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we have to get this. Such a good deal. Like, and I've wanted a Soda Stream forever. And Joe, my husband, was like, yeah, let's get it. Was that in the budget? Absolutely not. But I mean, there are some things that you can't pass up. So just kind of build in those support systems for yourself, and then also build barriers for yourself to not spend money.
Oh, such good advice. And I think like with the Soda Stream example, like the fact that you had wanted one for some time and then the opportunity popped up and then you purchased it, I feel like that is being intentional, right? Like this is not some random thing that all of a sudden now you want, right? You gave it some thought. And so although it may not have been in the budget, right? But you were presented with an opportunity to get this thing that you have been thinking about and had wanted for a discount. So
yeah, for a long time. Yeah. And I also think that's another good tip is to build in a waiting period, right? So for me, honestly, it's going to sound so silly, but if something's like over $70, I'm like, oh, I should wait on this. Like it's such a low amount in the grand scheme of things, but it makes me feel icky. Like that's my ick. It's $70. I'll like wait before I purchase anything that quote unquote big. And that's really saved me a lot of money just being like, I just need to have a little think on this or just sleep on it. And then I'll wake up and be like, I didn't really need that. Or I'll wake up and be like, man, I really wanted that Soda Stream. Now, how can I get it? And then, you know, a month later, it's 30% off. So build in buffers for yourself.
Identify your ick number.
Yeah, exactly.
Great piece of advice, actually. So you've mentioned budget, but I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts on budgeting and how important is budgeting for the person who is looking to be more frugal or intentional?
Budgeting is or should be your number one priority. Tracking your spending or budgeting, and they're different. If the B word freaks you out, tracking your spending first is probably going to be your best bet so you don't automatically throw your hands up and walk away from personal finance altogether. But my views on budgeting have changed throughout the years. I'm in a time period of my life where I'm actually not budgeting. Why? Because we just bought a house and I have no idea what anything's going to cost. There's no way for me to budget. And sometimes you're going to be in those time periods of transition where it just doesn't make sense to budget. You know, I can watch my spending and be like, oh, I think we're spending too much going out to eat. But like, as far as like my bills, I just don't know what it's going to be. But there have been points in my life where I have tracked every single dollar and I've budgeted in Mint every single month and I have my own spreadsheet. But I am of the thought that budgeting can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. It can literally be a piece of paper and a pencil, or you can have what I do, which is spreadsheets on spreadsheets and Mint. You know, it just all depends on your comfort level with budgeting. It depends on what you have going on in your life, how much time you can dedicate to it. But I truly believe that if you want to have a more intentional, mindful relationship with your money, budgeting is going to be the number one thing you can do to really know where your money is going and how it's coming to you. You're just not going to know anything to do. You're not going to be able to have financial goals without that information. So that data is really important. So if you're first starting off, I definitely recommend watching every single dollar. I think the zero-based budgeting method is perfect for beginners. And, you know, once you kind of are seasoned with that level of budgeting, you know, you can try other things. And I still use the zero-based budgeting. And I've been doing this for how many years? 7 years now. So you just got to find a method that works for you. Budgeting is going to be something that you need to do.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, zero-based budgeting is what I use as well, and it's what I help my clients with. And I think going back to your original point, if someone is truly deciding to improve in their financial situation, the information that they gain from a budget or budgeting is absolutely crucial for success. And I think you mentioned the B word, like people don't like the B word, but the reality is like a budget is just a tool and you're a user of that tool. And if you don't like what the budget says or what the budget shows you about your money, it's not the budget's fault, right? Like it's something with either your income or your expenses that needs to be adjusted so that you can feel comfortable with the information you're seeing.
Right, exactly. And I think it's also important to note that a budget is a living document. And what do I mean by that? It's you don't set a budget and then it's like written in stone that you absolutely have to spend $500 on grocery. That's not realistic. Budgets need to ebb and flow with you. And I've been doing this a long time, y'all, and no month looks the same. I swear there's always something that comes up that I have not planned for or that I have forgot, hashtag ADHD, but something happens and you have to adjust your budget, which is why when you're first starting out, you really need to look at your budget every single day, track those expenses every single day. And I would honestly do that for at least a quarter of the year, if not more. And you might find, like me, you fall in love with it and then you start an entirely new life and you build a business and now you're here talking to a podcast. But, you also may just find out like, oh, okay, so this is where my problems are. Here are my leaks. This is what I should probably focus on. I'm not making enough money to afford this. What can I do? And you're just not going to know that information until you look at that information.
Right. And it's like that saying goes, when you know better, you can do better.
Exactly. And you're not going to know unless you analyze your budget. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your divorce. If you don't mind, I would love to hear like what financial impacts the divorce had on you. And since you're married a second time, did you do anything differently? Like maybe have a prenup, or were there things that you took from your first marriage and either did differently or did the same moving into your second marriage?
Yeah. Divorce is not something I would wish on my worst enemy, especially a tumultuous divorce. It was not amicable. And my ex-husband dragged his feet, which cost more money in the long run. When I left our home, I moved into my parents' home and I was there for 4 months. And then I basically couch surfed at my friends' homes for another 3 months. And then my cousin had a rent house. And so I rented a house from her. And then I moved to Ohio to be with my now husband. But financially, I literally had nothing. I had $1,000 in my bank account, which was spent getting a new cell phone service, getting a storage unit to put all my stuff in. And then the rest of it went to a lawyer immediately. So I had my car and my dog and my clothes when I left my first husband. And the only reason I survived was because my parents and my friends. I mean, that's the only reason. My brother loaned me money for the attorney. I was living rent free. I didn't have any expenses with them because I just didn't have any money. I look at some people's situations and I get DMs on Instagram all the time of like, what should I do? What should I do? And I want to be very clear that I got through that terrible time in my life because I had people that really cared and I had a support system that lifted me up when I was incapable of it. I became addicted to Xanax and I drank almost every day. I ended up doing cocaine and a bunch of weed. So that whole time period of my life was really, really rough. And I honestly look at some women and I don't know how they get through it because I don't even know how I got through it. Like, I look back and I'm like, wow, like you survived that. That's wild. Thank God for community. So financially, I just didn't have anything.
And then I started coming around. I quit Xanax because I realized, whoa, this is a path I cannot go down. I mean, I have a choice here. So I made the right choice, thank goodness. And I just started stockpiling money because I was living very, very cheaply. I didn't have many expenses other than my attorney fees. I mean, all of my debt was paid off. And granted, I was driving a POS car. I mean, this car was from 2005. It had two-tone paint. Like the transmission was almost falling out of it. But I had a paid off car, whatever. So I just started stockpiling money, and eventually I saved a 3-month emergency fund, which when I lost my job allowed me to move to Ohio and start Weir digital marketing. So it was really rocky. Community support and privilege is really how I got through it. And without that, I don't know what I would have done.
Wow. Wow. Well, you came out on top, my friend.
Yeah, I turned a lot of pain into something kind of profitable. So that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an inspiration for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I look back at that woman and I have so much empathy for her, but I learned so much about my own grit. And to answer your other question, and it was like a dual question, I did not get a prenup because Joe and I literally had 2 pennies to rub together when we first got together. I was actually sending invoices for like $7. I literally sent companies invoices for $7 of work because I did that damn work.
Heck yeah.
But Joe is a very, very different person from my first husband. He doesn't see it as his money and our money. He sees it as our money. Collectively, we work as a team on our budget, as a team with our financial goals. I'm more of the day-to-day operations. He's more of the let's long-term plan, like what are we doing in the future? And we work very, very well together. And he knows it's extremely important to me. So he takes the time to be there when we're making plans for our family. So I didn't really do anything different. I just found a better person, a better match for myself. And there's nothing against prenups. I think women with money should absolutely get a prenup. I think men with money should get a prenup if they want to. It's personal. It's for each relationship. But yeah, very pro prenup. I just had nothing. So it didn't really matter.
I'm curious, before you got married to your first husband, did you have conversations about money? And then before you got married to your second husband, did you have conversations about money? Like, did you grow from each situation based off your own financial experiences?
Yeah, no. First husband, absolutely not. Second husband, Joe and I talked a lot about money. A lot about money. I mean, he knew that it was my passion. I mean, he'd seen my Instagram before, so he knew it was a big part of my life. And we paid off his car before we even moved from Columbus to Colorado. So we paid off his car, like his credit score increased. I like to joke, being with me will increase your credit score because it always does.
That's your track record.
No, just a little gold star for me. But yeah, the conversations were very different. With my first husband, I was in a really crappy situation and we got married way too fast because of money, because I didn't have healthcare, because I couldn't afford the university I was going to. And if I didn't marry him, I would have been kicked out of my university and I wouldn't have this beautiful degree on my wall. And it was a mutual decision. Like he was like, well, yeah, I don't want to be with a wife that doesn't have a degree and like can't have a better future if I did this. And we were going to get married anyway. So he was like, let's just do it. And so we did. In between classes, I literally went to a class, went to the courthouse, came back to go to class. Like that's how it was. With Joe, it's just very different, much more intentional, much more in line with who I am now. And we had these conversations about how we grew up with money and the struggles we had had and what we wanted our life to look like and what we were trying to build. And now it's just really exciting that I've gone from sending $7 invoices to basically living out my dream. I never thought it was possible, especially coming from that divorce.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm very happy for you. And I'm curious, like this is a total sidebar question, but were you looking for love a second time around when you found it? Or had you just been so focused on like, improving yourself and understanding yourself, and then it just kind of magically aligned?
So yes and no. I knew that I was young enough to fall in love again. And I think anybody young enough, that's not really the right phrase. I knew that I had love available in my heart, even after it was just walked all over. So I got divorced in 2017, actually 2018. I got separated in 2017. And in my first Christmas by myself with just my family, my brother, my sister-in-law, my mom, my dad, and their 2 kids, my mom gave me this ring, which is the first ring that my dad ever gave her. And I had my sister-in-law resize it to my ring finger because I was like, if I'm going to get into another marriage, I want it to be on my terms. And so she did. That was my Christmas gift that year. So I knew that I was capable of love. I just knew that it had to be a very different kind of love. And therapy helped with that. And taking a break from seriously dating helped with that. And then my best friend introduced myself and Joe. And well, the rest is history. I mean, she told us we should talk and we did. And we haven't stopped talking ever since. But yeah, I knew I wanted to be in love. I love love. It's amazing. And loving Joe, it feels like I waited for this kind of love my whole life and I finally have it. So, yeah.
Sweet. That's so sweet. Thank you for sharing that. I know that was a little off topic, but
No,
I just had to know.
yeah, no, it's fine. And I think I really almost went down a really bad path and I straightened myself out and I went to therapy. And I think when you go through something that drastic, divorce or someone really close to you dies or any jarring life event like that, I think that we need space and introspection and just to figure out what we really want. And I was able to do that. And so when I was presented with an opportunity of a lifetime, I believe, I took it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. So I'm curious if there's someone who is listening to our conversation and they totally feel hopeless in their financial situation, do you have any words of encouragement for that person?
Yeah, I've been there and shit sucks right now. I mean, that's just the way it is. When you look at the news, it's not like it's very hopeful for regular people, right? I mean, things are more expensive than they were 10 years ago. Student loans probably aren't going to be canceled. Payments are resuming. The middle and lower classes are just getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed while the top percent just keep growing. So, feeling hopeless, I feel, is a very valid and real response to what we're living through, this egregious wealth culture that really uplifts people in those positions that shouldn't be uplifted, in my opinion. So I think it's a real response, and I completely empathize with you. And I've been there. I've literally been at a kitchen table not knowing if I could eat. So, number one, I think look around you. This is normal, which is horrible and shouldn't be the case. But what you're feeling is normal and it's valid and it's real. But I want you to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of mistakes. I mean, all of the mistakes I have made, all of the things that you've listened to on this podcast, made me who I am today. And I think mistakes teach you so much more than success does. So you're going to fall down, you're going to mess up, but it all starts with one decision. It started with that one decision for me. And I think anybody, no matter what walk of life you come from, no matter who you are, can make a decision to be better. And you can make a decision to be 1% better every day. Just try 1% better. And you will start seeing your mindset shift. You will start wanting to do more things. You will start wanting to budget, track your spending, negotiate. You'll start seeking out that information. And it really starts with deciding between you, me, myself, and I, to just try and be better and educate yourself. And I think that you will be pleasantly surprised with the outcome of that.
I couldn't agree more. Vee, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Before we wrap, what's next for you and your companies? And how and where can my listeners connect with you?
What's next? What a great question, I don't know what's next, and that's okay. I'm day by day and I'm trying to enjoy my life right now. And I think that's really the cornerstone of slow living. I'm just trying to enjoy all the little moments and soak it up because I've worked really hard throughout my 20s to be here in my 30s. And so my 30s are the year or the decade of enjoyment. So I'm going to live it up. And as far as where y'all can find me, I'm at Vee Frugal Fox on all the social media, but I'm primarily on Instagram. That's usually where I hang out, or Twitter. My Twitter is kind of a dumpster fire, but it's very enjoyable, entertaining. So,
well, I will definitely link to your profiles in the show notes, and I will definitely be taking a page from your book and taking it day by day and just appreciating everything that's led me where I am right now. And I thank you for sharing that.
You deserve it.
Thank you so much, Vee.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into City Girl Savings today. I hope you feel empowered and inspired to master your money as you make your way to your dream life. Make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when a new episode comes out. I truly value your thoughts and feedback, so please leave a review and let me know how this podcast has impacted you. Can't wait to chat soon and make it a great day.